Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Charles from the channel Books on Stereo, and I'm here to do another in conversation video with you guys. And this one may be a little bit controversial. It may get you in your feels, but I have the perfect guest with me today. I have Jen from the book Refuge here joining me today. And today we're going to be talking about reading goals or reading challenges. Now, if you don't know what a reading challenge is, essentially at the beginning of each year, you say, I want to read X amount of books. And then you just do your thing, you read these books, but then come to the end of that year and you start seeing everyone else post their reading counts. And then sometimes that's where drama can start. So, how do you initially feel about reading challenges or reading goals, Jen?
Yeah. Well, I never made one until I started YouTube, because I was using Goodreads, but I don't think I made challenges at all because I just was reading for fun. I mean, I still just read for fun. Let's be clear. I'm reading for fun. But yeah, I never really made one. So yeah, I don't know. I think they're great now to just, I mostly make, I mean, I know we'll get into this, but I mostly set my goals in a specific place so that I can beat them. Some people
Mm,
may do theirs different, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But for me, it's just more of a checkpoint through the year to be like, oh, I hit that now. Cool. But I don't know. They're fun. They can be fun. I think it depends on what you're using your reading goal for, which I'm sure we'll get
mm.
into. Like, what's your purpose behind it? For me, I'm just kind of because Goodreads tells me to, and I use Goodreads to track what I read for, mostly for other people, because I have other ways of tracking my books. It's mostly for other people's
Mhm.
enjoyment that I do that. So,
Yeah, actually, I had the same thing. Like, I didn't really use Goodreads until I discovered BookTube.
yeah.
I was like, oh, maybe I should enter the amount of books that I'm going to. I never once thought to like put that number on
Hmm.
myself. So coming into BookTube, I feel like Goodreads has kind of like changed it a little bit. It almost, in a way, makes it feel like it's like weird having a social media just for books
Right.
and like updating you're currently reading, and then like you can compare everyone's reading challenges or
Mm.
reading goals, I should say. And I'm a person who doesn't like setting goals like in my reading or like TBRs because
Hmm.
immediately I will go in and change my Goodreads reading challenge goal to meet the amount of books I actually
Right.
read during that year. So I'm like, you read over 50 books over whatever your goal was. I'm like, oh, look at me, even though I just changed it. Or just
Yeah.
like with TBRs. So I feel like it creates a little bit of pressure, but I
Mm.
think you brought up a good point is that what is the purpose of why we use reading
Yeah.
challenges and reading goals? Like, are they actually really helpful to the reader?
Yeah.
If,
Well,
especially on such a public website.
right. Well, and I wonder for people who aren't creators, why are they setting a reading goal? That's more what I mean. Because again,
Mhm.
I might be doing my reading goal because as a, you know, as a creator, I'm like, this is how many I want to read to maintain the content that I have. Um, because I mean, I pump out a lot of content. And if I'm not continually reading books for that, when you have a dry, like there was a time, it doesn't happen often, but when I actually have a dry spell or I'm really busy, I'm like, oh, well, I don't know what to talk about this week because I didn't read anything new. So for me, it's a little more like, I don't know, I just know the pace I want to be reading at for that. For people who aren't doing it for social media purposes, I think of people who it's even part of their yearly resolutions. Like, oh, I want to read one book a month or I want to
Mm,
read one book a week. People have more of a goal for that purpose. But I mean, at the end of the day, if your purpose in the reading goal isn't to help you read more for you personally, I think you're maybe looking at a reading goal the wrong way because
mm,
isn't that the purpose? Like literally the reading goal is to read such and such amount of books.
books.
So I don't know. My personal philosophy going forward now is to just do the same or better than the year before. Like that's kind of what I'm aiming for.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think it depends on your purpose. Like if you're a creator, maybe it's like that where I need to read 10 books a month for this, or is it a goal of I want to do better than it's just hard. Like, why are
Mhm.
you doing it to do better than somebody else with anything?
Mhm.
Nobody's giving them a prize on Goodreads for who read the most. So
Yeah.
why does it matter? You know? So, and Goodreads tracks it like shit too, let's be honest with this. Like, I just had that, like, mine shows, and I know again, mine's gratuitous because I do a lot, but mine says that I've read 760 books, where I'm actually at, I know it's a lot, I'm actually at 700 because all of those other 60 books are the books that I've DNF'd. Well, if I want
Oh,
a book, you know, they don't have a DNF shelf. They either
no,
have
they
like you
don't.
read it or you haven't. So I don't know. There's things that like we know Amazon doesn't update Goodreads enough because there's nothing else that works as well. Like they have everybody using
Yeah.
Goodreads, and even the other options that have come up that are good ones. Like there are some good options out there that I've seen. For me to move my entire library over there and like, and then my viewers wouldn't use it, so they would still be wanting to check my Goodreads,
On
you know.
Goodreads.
So
Hmm.
Amazon has you locked in, so you're not really going to leave it. But anyway, sorry. Sidetracking is normal.
No, no, you're fine. You bring up a really good point about the divide between content creators as well as just people who just consume said book content. I
Hmm.
think almost you brought up a point that I think is something that I kind of view Goodreads a little bit as. Like my Goodreads is where like it's just morally for me to track what I have read versus
Right.
what I haven't read because
Hmm.
like we both have similar reading counts for the years. And so
Yep.
like if I don't put in Goodreads, I literally have the thought where I'm like, did I read
Right.
this book?
Yep.
I vividly remember scenes from this book, but it
Yep.
says I didn't read it on Goodreads. Hold up.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Goodreads can't be lying to me right now.
Right, absolutely. And I mean, it can sometimes if you another thing I don't like, and I'm not completely blaming this on Goodreads, but like if you have your Goodreads linked with your Kindle, which I do like to do because if
Mhm.
I'm, you know, reading through a lot, I like it to track it and then I'll go back in later and rate those books that I finish. But if you've opened a book and said you're reading it and then you exit out, it says you're done with it. Like
Yeah.
it'll kick it off your, and I'm like, I'm literally at 50%. Can't you tell that I'm at 50%? I'm not done just because I'm reading more than one book. Anyway, sorry. That's a minor, but it only does it on my Kindle. It doesn't do it on my Fire tablet or my
Mhm.
phone if I exit it. That irritates me. Anyway, but yeah, same with you. Like I need it to track. And I also use Goodreads for all of my recommendation videos that I do
Mhm.
because when I'm looking up a certain trope, I don't necessarily remember all the tropes in the books that I
That
have
you
read
read.
a lot. So when I just did a possessive hero rec video. So I type in, you know, possessive heroes and then I look and see which ones I've read that are in this Goodreads list. So like I use Goodreads just for my other content creation and finding out who the publisher is and all that stuff. So anyway, that's apart from what a Goodreads goal is, but it's like Goodreads offers all of that,
Mhm.
but I think it also gives people some anxiety when they see someone reading that many books at once or reading that many. And I'm just like, for me, it's just more to show people what I'm kind of looking at. Like, that's what I'm personally using it for, is to show people who follow me there where I'm at with everything. So,
Yeah, definitely. Because interesting when you're a creator. Because I get some people going like, oh, they look at like, oh, Charles rated this book and wrote a review, and I was like, did I even remember? Like, I don't even think I write the review for like other people that may be interested in the book or am I currently reading, which drives people crazy because I never clean it out.
right.
I
Yeah.
never clean it out, so it says I'm reading like 60 books
Oh, yeah.
at the same time, but I'm like, don't worry, they're all done. And
Yeah.
then just going back to the reading goal, I
Yes.
really don't put that much stock into it. I think before we started recording, Jen brought up a really great point about almost it's like a little bit of inherent pressure with being
Right.
a creator on BookTube and making videos about books is that you have to keep on reading a decent amount of books to be able to talk or make videos or make content or make posts on any of the various social media platforms. So even though there isn't like a push like you have to read a ton of books, I definitely feel like as creators, it's kind of hard to create content when you're just going like, oh, I already put like these 5 books in like 10 other videos, but here are these
Yeah.
5 books again because I'm just not reading at the same pace. So it almost feels like even though that reading goal is there, it's encouraging creators to read more. If you're reviewing, if you do arcs, if you do advanced listener copies, You're
Yeah.
almost in a place where you feel like you have to make this content and have to post higher numbers than normal to keep
Well,
the
and
content going.
there's another side of that coin of like you just fall into the hype as well. Like for
Mhm.
me, it isn't always like that it's like, oh, I just noticed that four of my friends all picked up this one. I want to be part of the conversation, so I'm going to read it right now. And that's something where, a book will just blow through your friend group. And if you're the last one to get on it, then you feel like you're left out. And that's just like a natural peer pressure. That's what's great for like indie authors. If a creator catches on to it and then all of their friends do it and all of them are talking about it, that's wonderful for that author that would happen. So it's some of all of those things. And again, I would go back to, so I have like behind the screen where we're recording, I just have my Goodreads challenge page up, and you can, when I look at it, I can tell the difference because in 2018 I had started my channel and I had read 116 books, and then the next year it jumped up to 162, but in 2020 I jumped to 694 books. And that's
Wow.
the year that I went exclusively romance on my channel, right?
Hmm.
So I was reading, that's when I was up to reading like 2 books a day, because in general, they are sometimes easier to read and easier to get
To
through
read.
because there isn't as much to process as when you're reading fantasy. Sometimes you got to slow down a lot more. But the thing that I always encourage people at is that part of that is because I switched to romance, but part of it is just that I am a speed reader now. I process the words faster, just like anything. When you're learning karate or you're becoming a runner, like the more you use
Mhm.
those muscles, the quicker that you get through things. So
Mhm.
yes, I am a speed reader now. And I used to look at other creators who could read that much. And I was like, how do you do that? I don't understand. I read all the time and I don't read that much. But part of it is just when you read all day, every day, like you do get faster at
Mhm.
what you're doing. You're just going to. So if you're just a person who loves to read, but you're not consuming the amount that we're consuming, well, yeah, maybe reading 10 books a month like is a lot for you, and that's you reading all the time. Or you're only doing audiobooks but you're listening at 1.2 speed or something like that. Like you're not going to get through an
As many
audiobook
books.
in 2 hours like we can. I can get through an 8-hour audiobook in 3.5 hours, you know
Mhm.
and know everything that's going on. So anyway, those are just some of the things that when people say like, how do you read so much, they want to know. And I'm like, hey, do you have the time to dedicate to it? Because if you don't, then you're just going to be a casual reader. Like that's okay. It is okay.
Mhm.
But don't compare yourself to the people that like, this is literally a part-time job for me, reading. Like it's a self-elected part-time job, like I've
Mhm.
chosen to make it one, but I dedicate, you know, 18 hours a day to reading. Of course, I'm going to
Reading.
get through that many books. And if
Yeah.
you only have 2 hours once the kids are in bed before you pass out, you're not going to be able to do that. So, to bring it back to the reading goal, like I just know that I'm going to get through about 2 books a day. I get through a book while I'm at work and I get through a book while I'm at home. So I'm going to read 2 books a day. So
Mhm.
anyway, that was a long rant, but
No, no, you're fine. That was all really good stuff. That was all really good stuff. And kind of like treating your like, going back to treating reading almost as like a muscle, like you
yeah.
exercise that muscle. The
Hmm.
more you read, the quicker you get through books, the quicker you can like find which medium. Because some people only read really quickly on paperback. Some people read really quickly with ebooks.
Yeah.
Some are only audiobook people and they can fly through a book like it's nothing. But I think, like you said, at the end of the day, I think it's not even like intentional, but it works for the indie community as well as traditional published communities. If we as the creators are going like, oh my goodness, we read like all these brand new, really great new releases that are so fantastic. And like you said, you almost feel like you don't want to be like when your favorite creator starts raving about a book, you're like, I want to get to this, but I'm a
Yeah.
slow reader. I don't know if I can make it. So like
Yeah.
it's great for publicity and getting these books out there, but I can definitely see the pressure that may cause. But I think it's always important. It's the point that you made that it's not a competition. I
Yeah.
think it's more important. I'd rather you read 100 5-star books than 500 3 to 4 star
Right.
reads.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's better. I
Yeah.
think, especially if you're not a content creator, because honestly, I feel like I'm like not the best to advocate because I'm like I do not DNF, so I will like
True.
suffer my way through a book because, like you said, Goodreads doesn't allow you an option to DNF books. So that's why
Yeah.
my tallies end up higher because I'm like I'm going to hate read this book until I
Yeah.
finish this book, and I will not start another book until I finish this book. But I think honestly, the takeaway is just read what you want to read and read at the pace that you want to read and don't attack other people in the community who read more.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
not like thing to flex on because I
Right.
feel like at the end of the year, it's always something where if I post like I read 800 books in the year, everyone's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Oh, this person's just bragging right now. It's
Right.
just like different stages of your life, different priorities. If you're making content, you're going to read a lot more naturally. You're going to get arcs. You're going to get all these different opportunities to read exclusive new books. So
Yeah.
it kind of
Well,
comes with the territory.
you find a way to fit it in too. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I say that like some of my best friends, like we know when I'm standing in line, I either have an audiobook or I have it on my phone. Like for a long time, I only used Kindle on my phone. Like I only got a Kindle a couple years ago and I still had KU. Like I've had KU for off and on for like 10 years and I exclusively used my phone before then. And in fact, I even had a Kindle for a while and like I still preferred my phone for some reason. I would be like, oh, because I had continuous scroll like
Oh, so you could just.
and you can just go. But anyway, it's about finding what's best for you. And again, like I just it's like in anything, there's always going to be people who are ignorant about it or don't care to believe that just because you're really good at something that it has to be a lie. Like I had someone, and it was so silly, but someone on Goodreads commented on my review of Outlander, the newest one, where I didn't do a full review. I was just like, wow, this book was amazing. 6 out of 5 stars. That's all that my review was because I have 2 full videos talking about this book. And so this person is like, did you actually read this in 3 days? You must not have, based on how skimpy your review is. And I'm just like, well, I mean, I wasn't mad, but I was like, well, no, I read it in 3 days. I read an average of 650 pages a day. I definitely can read 900 pages in 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a YouTube channel. That's where I put my reviews at. Like, I only review a book on Goodreads if an author needs me to, because otherwise I just don't. I want to get better at that, but like, part of the reason I can keep reading too is I don't stop and write reviews for stuff. I review stuff on my channel. Like, my channel is still my main thing. I only write a review on Goodreads if it's for publicity for the author. So most of my reviews, like this year, I tried to be better and at least say like, I liked the characters 4 out of 5. You know, I at least try to like say that, but otherwise I don't do that. And so someone's like, you must have just put dates in or whatever. I was like, nope. I started it the day it came out. I had it on ebook, audiobook, and the paperback so that I could switch between them. I read it in 3 days. I promise you. While taking care of my newborn niece and helping my sister with everything, I read it. Got an earbud in while we
Got like the physical and the Kindle book, and you're just like, I got this covered. Anyone gets damaged, I can always just switch to the other
I
one.
know. And sometimes I was doing 2 at once because I was listening to it and highlighting stuff and all at once. So yeah, like it's with anything. People just have different, I can look at someone who's an Olympic swimmer and be like, that's a lie. You're cheating. And I'm like, no, they've just been practicing for how many years to be that good. And don't be jealous. Just if you want that, start working for it. And if not, then just shut up. Like, come on, just shut up about it. So anyway, that's my sad. I'm like, why does it matter? That's the thing, Charles. With a lot of these conversations we get into, I appreciate the conversation, but at the end of it, I'm like, why do people care? Like, why do they want to take it on as like you're lying about how much you read? Like, how does that serve anybody? Like, have you listened to my in detailed reviews I do every week? I've definitely read the books. Like, I've read them. Come
It's
on.
like I feel like there's like a couple like pressures that people, I guess I don't know the best word to call it, that people feel when they're either joining BookTube for the first time or they've been in the community for a long time. Like the pressure to pick up, like to buy a bunch of books, have like huge book hauls, used to be a huge thing, or you are not a true like person who reads XYZ genre if you haven't read, if you love fantasy, why haven't you read Brandon Sanderson yet, or stuff like
Right.
that that
Yeah.
always gets weaponized against either the creator or the content consumer or the viewer, I should say. And then also you have like some viewers who like come after content creators, like almost see like how in your situation where someone said obviously you haven't read Outlander. I know that you can extrapolate that scene viewers comment on recommendation videos saying like, "Oh, this person clearly hasn't read all these books," or
Right.
something like that. And that's another thing that gets used again. So it's like almost like you have to have Goodreads to prove that, like, see, on this date, on this time, I rated this book XYZ, so I can prove that I read it, which is kind
Yeah.
of ridiculous. It's
Yeah.
like some of the things that are issues in the booktube community really don't hold any weight outside of the
Yeah.
book community. Like if you're reading more than 2 books a year, you're probably reading more than what average people read.
Right.
I'm like, if
Yeah.
you're I'm like, so you're already winning by that metric alone. So like who
Yeah.
cares if someone reads like
Just
600 plus books? Like it's whatever you want to read. Because I bet you, like you can probably say this too, but I know for me, probably like at least half of those books I wish I never read. I wish I never read. Well,
I'm
because
a
like,
little bit more discerning, so maybe not that many.
like,
My average rating on Goodreads is like 4.12. So,
oh, that's
because
amazing.
I've said this too. I was like, I generally know. Like I'll take a risk sometimes. I'll take a risk, but I only had 15 books that were 2.5 or less. And I had 50 DNFs, like we said,
Hmm.
out of 750. And then I had 15 that I actually had rated because I don't finish them or I don't even start them. That's the whole point. For me,
Mm,
I don't even start them. Like if there's a lot of reverse harems are super popular and I was like, this reverse harem doesn't have anything that I want to read in it. Why would I read it and then rant about it and be upset and be that jerky person who's giving it a bad review
hmm.
when like it's not my gig. Just like I wouldn't go read a horror thriller and then be upset that it was a horror thriller. Like I'm not that type of
Yeah.
person. And some people are. Like if it's a popular book, if people are talking about it, they don't do any research about it. They'll just read it, which is fine. Like that could be a great way to find a brand new favorite book to do that.
Hmm.
But I know what I want in a book. I know what I like. It's why I hate, I know this is a whole different, it's why I hate a women's fiction disguised as a romance. Because it's like, I
Mm,
wouldn't have read the book. I wouldn't have picked it up if you told me it was just women's fiction because I know it's not going to have what I want it to have. And I just feel like over the years, I know what I want. So my ratings are generally a 4 or 5 because I don't read anything that I
you
expect,
read what you want to read.
yeah, unless it was a buddy
Hmm.
read or it was for a special thing. Like I just did a special reading vlog where I was reading things, and 2 of those books were very low rated because I would not have read them of my own free will. So anyway, that's my thing too of like, I get what you say where you're like, half of them I wish I wouldn't have read, even though you read this one. Whereas I'm the other way where I'm like, nope, there was very few I didn't like because I do the research first so that I don't have to suffer through a book or something.
Yeah, I do that a lot. I get like one click happy on
Yeah.
Amazon. I'm like, oh, this ebook sounds interesting. Buy it, and then I'm like, oh no, why did I no? Okay, let's see if chapter 2 gets better.
Now I
Maybe
have
chapter 3, 50%. I'm like, it has to get better.
we're
Like,
glutton for punishment.
please, we're already this far into this book. Like, I'm not giving up on you right.
You're so funny. I do that very rarely. I did do that recently because the covers, like I'm a sucker for a pretty cover. Whether it's a beautiful old historical or it's a really well covered indie book. Because part of the thing is like book covers cost a lot of money for an indie author. So if they have a really snappy cover, they paid probably a couple $1,000s for it,
Yeah,
which means they're
easily.
probably a good author who has the budget to do that, right? Like Sophie Lark, her covers are gorgeous because they invested in those covers and they are
Mhm.
paying, like it's paying them back. So an author who is really bad, pardon that, they're probably not going to have the best covers because they probably
Mhm.
can't afford it because of whatever. But anyway, I got tricked. I got tricked by a pretty cover. that did not have a story in it that matched the cover. But I finished it because I was like, again, I don't rate a book that I don't finish it,
Mhm.
because I very rarely, only if it's an arc and I've read, anyway, only if it's an arc and I've read more than 50%, I will give it a 3-star and be like, I didn't like it. But I finished
Mhm.
it and I happily gave that book 2 stars because I was like, I hated you. I paid money for you, and all my friends were excited for you, and I hated you. But I
Like
don't.
you felt betrayed.
Oh, I felt so betrayed. It was the most beautiful cover, like, honest to goodness. It's everything that I want book covers to have, and so I applaud her because I know there was, just from the Goodreads reviews, there was a ton of people who bought it for the same way, so good for her. Good for her for getting a good cover, because I hope you made all your money back on the first week, because I will rant about that book many times in the future. I did not like it at all.
Oh my goodness, that's so funny.
Yeah.
I get duped all the time, but I never stop. I never stop reading. It's
I
because
love
like I learned very early on, like there's some books that I absolutely loved and they did not get better until like 80% of the way through the book.
That's true.
And I'm like, this is masterful. I'm like, what was I on? And I was like, oh
Sure.
man, I was like, and there's so many books I DNF that I went back to. I'm like, this is absolutely amazing. Why did I DNF this all those years ago when I first read it? So I'm like, I'm DNF averse is what I call my position. So if I start with a book, I'm like, we are ride or die, which means that I will put books down, come back 6 months later, and then start where I originally left off, and somehow I still remember. I don't know how I do that. It's just like gotten the perk with like reading so many books. I can just jump into another romance. I'm like, okay, this is our main character. Unless it's
Yeah.
a reverse
You can
harem, then
kind of
like
get
I'm
a second
lost.
chance. You can kind of get a second chance with some of the
Yeah.
books. Because, yeah, that is true. It is true that there's also sometimes you read a book and it's just the wrong day. It's just the wrong day and it's not working. Or you've just read a book that's just like this book. And if you'd read
Mhm.
this book first, you would like this book better. Like, that happens to me a lot, especially when I'm like, when I fall into a trope hole, like I did that with survival romances. I love those. I read like 8 of them. Well, eventually they start to be the same story. So then you're like,
Mhm.
oh, I guess I'm done with this trope now.
Like that's good.
But I'll come back later because I like this trope. Just right now, I've read the exact same, because that's why things are tropes, like that's literally
Mhm.
why trope exists, is it's something that's done over and over again and it becomes a trope. So anyway, interesting.
Yeah.
So
That's like this was like such a fun conversation because I feel like now I feel like even though we've already like gave our thoughts on reading challenge, I feel like we're always at the end of the year, everyone's going to ask, how do you read so many books in each year? Because that's always comes with the territory. They always want to like somehow demystify that you're not actually reading these books or you have like some
right.
magical trick
Yeah.
to get through all these books. So, like, what are some of your go-to tips on if someone wants to increase their productivity or reading in the new year? What would you recommend that they do?
Yeah, I think I can fit it into like two main things. Two main things. One, I think that you need to give yourself the best chance. So pick books you think you will like. I know I've just been saying that. Like, nothing puts me into a reading slump faster than having to push through a book I don't want to be reading, or reading a book that is just so out of my taste. It can put me in a bit of a funk. For me, that usually only lasts like a couple of hours and I'm ready to start something new. But I know for some of my friends, like they literally won't pick up a book for like 3 days because it's like you said, they're having to go back to that book, start, like set yourself up for success. Like,
Mhm.
take the advice of creators you trust or tropes you like, read with those, because it's much easier to get in the momentum and being excited to pick up the next book if you're reading books that you want to read.
Mhm.
And be willing to like break your TBR. Like, we didn't even bring that up. If
Oh,
you're
yeah.
someone who's setting a TBR because you're a creator, maybe be willing to be a bit more of a pantser. That's something that I had to decide early on, because I can have a TBR for a couple of books where like I really need to get through these books because they're coming out this month, or my book club books. But otherwise, I keep my TBR very open. I have a general idea of books to get through, but I keep it very open so that I can just jump from whatever book I want to be reading. The other thing I would say is, like I said, like prioritize reading. If you can't be like me where you can't fit it in all the time because you have X, Y, and Z you have to do, find the certain times of day that you can set aside for it and do it. When I used to work in retail, I had a 45-minute lunch break and I read for that. I got through 3 of the Outlander books at the time that I worked at Maurice's, a clothing store, because every break I had one of the big ass mass markets, and I would get through, a chapter or two during that every day. And then since I was a kid, I always read the last, hour to 2 hours, depending on if I was, couldn't put the book down before I would go to, and that's what I did in high school. It was, I got home, had to do my homework, dinner, time with my family. We'd usually watch a TV show. And then the last 2 hours of the night, I read a book. And I got through pretty much a book a day doing that when I was back in high school, So those are kind of the main tips, is that, I understand if people can't dedicate the amount of time that I do, but I think you'd be surprised if you have those set times that are special to you. Even if you're a mom, I bet you can dedicate the last 30 minutes of the day to yourself, when you're both already in bed. Maybe you can be reading on your phone for the last 30 minutes or whatever. That's going to help you increase it, because that is set aside and everyone in your family knows, like, I'm reading for this amount of time at the end of the night or whatever. So start small. And yeah, also, if you're not reading audiobooks already, like, try it. So many people are like audiobooks. And I'm like, I promise you, I said the same thing. I said the same thing for 10 years. I was like, oh no, I don't like that. And then it was just one time I got given a set of CDs that had, I think it was literally Pride and Prejudice as a gift. And I was like, oh, I've read this book how many times? I could listen to it. And I was like, wow, this is such a cool form of storytelling. And, it still took a few years before I was like wanting to listen to all of my books that way. It was more of like a treat, like if I had a long drive or something. But now where I work, I have an audiobook going all day long, and it doesn't distract from my work. So I'm able to do that.
A tip is just don't compare yourself to others.
That's the big one.
Everyone reads at different paces. And I think, too, also, if you take your time and read, you can have different opinions on different books that may be popular. You can find new gems that maybe, like, people who read like 800 books, that they would just kind of like skate by and may not like prioritize that book.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just read what you want to read what you care about, what you're enjoying, or the topics that you care about and you enjoy with. And I think that, like, reading what you like, you get through books much, much quicker.
Absolutely.
Because you're invested. Like, you want to be sucked into the story. You want to experience that little bit of that escapism through reading, and you want to enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
And so also I would say, if you want to incorporate, like, you want to read diversely or XYZ, I say take it easy on yourself. If you just want to read whatever you want to read, because I do think that can deter someone from like hitting their reading goal or reading as many books as they want to, because you feel like you have to read this or you have to read that. Just read what you want to read, because honestly, at the end of the day, reading is a hobby for most people.
Yeah.
And it should be treated like, not like a throwaway hobby, but like something that you just do for fun.
Right.
And if you want to take it up a notch and like do reviewing or XYZ, your reading can change to reflect that. But I think none of us creators would be doing this if we didn't like reading, discussing, and talking about books that we're enjoying.
Where I would interject with that, I absolutely agree with that, is how I would split that up is, one, if you are someone who you're not reading in the public eye, okay, you don't have any Bookstagram or TikTok or anything, definitely read whatever you want to be reading, because nobody's looking at it. Nobody's following, no one's watching. Like, you do not need to be reading what the top romance readers are reading if you don't want to. Don't get stuck with those. Read whatever you want. Absolutely. And number two, if you are a creator with a Bookstagram, a BookTube, TikTok, whatever, I still say you should read what you want, because there is an audience for it. There is always an audience for what you want. Like, I was really nervous about talking about romance on my channel the first year and a half, even though if you watch like my old videos, I mean, don't, but you can. I talked more about YA fantasy, historical fiction is what I was reading, but I was still reading romance the whole time. I just would be like, oh yeah, and I read this Eloisa James. It was nice, 5 stars. And I like wouldn't really talk about it because I didn't think people were interested. And then it was when I had other romance creators start, like, it was when I first started to meet them, they'd be like, "Oh, I love that you love Julia Quinn. She's my favorite." And I would be like, "Oh, there are people interested in what I want to talk about." Like,
Mhm.
there's a community out there for whatever your favorites are, whether it's manga or fantasy or sci-fi, like there is a market for it.
Mhm.
So, yeah, even if you're a creator, you don't need to fall into a certain group because your group will find you. Like you will find them. It was Bree from In Love and Words who invited me officially into the romance community. She was like, "Yeah, there's a group of us who are going to be doing this or whatever." And I was like, "Oh, cool. Here's a bunch of friends." But I was like on my own,
Mhm.
just the only person I had to look up to was like Jess from Peace Love Books. She was the only one that I had seen because I didn't know about anyone else yet. So
Mhm.
anyway, that's just kind of a follow up of like, on both fronts, you should read what you want to read, because if you're a creator, you want it to be authentic and you want to be able to gush about books, and you don't want to have to be critical about things because you're reading what you don't want to read. And if you're just reading for your own pleasure, then why the hell do you care? Just read it for you,
Exactly.
because otherwise you're trying to get better and faster at reading and you're not reading anything you want to be reading. Like, what a waste of money. What a waste of money and a waste of
And
time.
time, yeah.
Don't do it. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's my kind of parting thing is, this all comes down to just do what's best for you. And I mean, yeah, we can give you tips. We want to help you, but just understand like why you want to be reading more. Like, why do you want to read 600-700 books a year like we do?
Mhm.
If it's because you want to be consuming that much, you want to be able to do it, well, then there are things you can do. But if it's because you want to be able to be on the same level, that's not a healthy.
It's not a good goal. It's not a healthy goal because
You'll
I feel
always be
like
on the outside.
once you trend and you read more and more, like we said earlier, you almost like develop a stronger muscle. So I can grab a 300-page book and I can knock it out and read it in a day, and it's
Mhm.
nothing to me.
Yep.
And I can still tell you mostly like most of the big things that happen to it. I may not get all the small details.
Yep.
It like changes how I read, how I approach a book. I'm more looking at the big plot details and some of the minor details that make sense for the story. And
Yeah.
then if I get that, then I'm like, okay, that was a good reading experience. That's all I needed to talk about the book to
Right.
other people. So it's like
Yeah.
whatever your priorities are,
Yeah.
you do you. Don't worry about anyone else. Read
Because I
what you want to
have
read. Read some good books and recommend them to me.
I have like two different modes, and I like how you said it. Like, one of them is like when I'm reviewing a book and I'm kind of dreading it. Like, I maybe asked for the book like 2 months ago and now I'm not really
Mhm.
interested. So I'm just trying to like know who the characters are or whatever. And then there's the times where you're reading where you are just looking for your next favorite book. And that
Mhm.
is my favorite thing. Like, when I'm just on the hunt for my next favorite, that's the best because there's no expectations, there's nobody watching. I'm just reading for my own enjoyment. And that's really great. And when you become a creator, especially someone who's reviewing books, you do have to give up a little bit of that if you want to be reviewing new books that come out. Um,
Mhm.
I try to keep that low. Um,
Mhm.
but I also want to be able to promote authors. Like, one of the greatest joys I've had this year is interviewing indie authors and promoting their books. Like, it's been one of the best things ever to directly affect someone's income when you love their books. Like, granted, these are only
Mhm.
people I've loved, to be like, wow, I put money in these people's pockets. I put food in their mouths, doing something that they love, which is writing, giving me something that I love, which is books. So, there's the trade-offs. Like, that makes you feel all warm and fuzzy, but
Yeah.
sometimes I read some books that I really did not want to read, and then I had to be kind of mean about them because I had to be honest. Like, that's my number one thing. I'm going to be honest. So that's the trade-off.
Yeah, and I think kind of bringing us to a conclusion, I think just to summarize everything we said here, just do what you want to do. Read what you want to read. Set your goal. Don't set a goal. Do this. Don't do that. Be on Goodreads. Don't be on Goodreads. I think there's space for everyone in the booktube community, no
Yep.
matter what you want to do. You can be in romance. You can be in fantasy. You can be in sci-fi. You can be in like nonfiction. You can be in literary fiction. There's so many different avenues for you to explore, and I think if you want to put like guardrails or you want to put like guides to help you kind of structure if you like that structure in your reading life, go for it. But I think at the end of the day, like we just said, Don't compare yourself to others. You are going to be fine with doing whatever you want to do. I think the beauty about the booktube community is just read books. It's
Yep.
always an encouragement to read new books, find great new authors, find your next 5-star read, find genres that you didn't know you would be interested in, or subgenres or tropes or whatever, and just like really expand your world and really enjoy the fact that we have so many books, so many audiobooks all at our disposal for you to just kind of jump into and experience different worlds. But Jen, any parting thoughts from you?
No, I mean, thank you for having me. I again, I just want to iterate, like, just a few years ago, I only read 40 books in 1 year.
Mhm.
And I was having just as much fun reading when I read 40 books a year as I am now reading 700 books a year.
Mhm.
So just make sure you're enjoying, to the best of your ability, make sure you're enjoying what you read, because otherwise, what's the point? You know, like, this is entertainment. For some of us, yeah, it's a little bit of a side job, but at the heart of it, it's for entertainment. It's entertainment that I end up getting to make, a little bill money for. But for you, the person reading, like, make sure you enjoy yourself, because then it doesn't matter how many books you read. If you read 1,000 books that year and you didn't like any of them, well, what was the point?
What is it? Was it really worth it?
Did you just waste your whole year? Yeah, you probably did.
But thank you again, Jen, so much for coming on my channel. I'll leave all her links down in the description box down below. If you love romance, if you want all the content, like Jen, you just like, you're prolific with your videos.
Oh,
I'm like,
thank
I don't even know, like, I can't remember what the last 5 books I read were. But I was like, watching your videos, I'm like, I bow down. I bow down and show
you.
mad respect. So you guys will absolutely love Jen's channel. Thank you again, Jen, again for coming on my channel. And I'll catch you guys all for a brand new video. Bye, everyone.